Hello there, Birdie here with another video. This time Birdie talks, but not about tactics. So this is an idea I've had for a while, to have a bit of a new series, which isn't just talking about tactics and strategy in the game, isn't just going through armies and reviewing the lists in detail. I thought with the FAQ coming up in February and just other major announcements within the game, it could also be fun to have a bit of a discussion video. So to kick it off, I thought we would delve into the psychology of rolling dice. Now, as always, there's a plan for the video. I'm going to talk you through the contenders, and then at the end we've got the results of a little experiment that I've done, and there's some conclusions, and hopefully at the end of the video you'll like and subscribe and all that good stuff. So my idea for the video is we all roll dice as part of the game, and even though we all understand that it's a 1 in 6 chance, every dice is random, and there should be no bearing on what the result is going to be. However, hopefully you're all about as nuts as I am, and there's certain dice that you kind of have a bit more faith in or trust, and there's other dice that you just have absolutely no faith in and don't trust to use. And in reality, we shouldn't really have that. You should just accept dice are dice, and they're going to betray you in big moments. But I thought I'd do a little bit of an experiment. Now, the experiment is I have 6 sets of dice that I use at all my tournaments. 3 sets that I use for my good armies and 3 sets that I use for the evil armies. And they, of course, you use them to assign them to certain characters and models as you go through the game. Just so you know where the might is and who's two-handing and all of this stuff, as you should. So for me here, 3 sets for the good armies, the 2 Dalamroth dice and a Dale dice, and for evil I've got the Azog, Doggleder, and just these funky purpley pink ones that I found on eBay. So before I go into the results and the dice themselves, the experiment was, as you can see here, I own 10 of 2 of the sets and 8 of the other 4 sets. And I wanted a good sample size of data to make sure it's producing decent results. So what I did was I looked for a common denominator with enough rolls where the sample size feels like it's a good indicator of the dice. So my conclusion was 120 rolls. So that would mean 15 rolls for all the 8 dice sets and 12 rolls for the 2 10 dice sets. And I was jotting down the results of each individual roll, and it produces then 120 rolls of the sets of dice. And going into it, talking you through the dice here, the one I use the least for my good armies is Dale. I was expecting it to maybe finish middle of the pack, although I don't know, I just very rarely see it come up with 6s. I don't really trust it. I haven't been using it much, if I'm honest, recently. I have my Dalamroth light coloured dice. Now these ones are not official Games Workshop ones or anything. They're from something like the Orc Scrapyard or something for dice. They are still available. I did look them up to make sure I was talking about the right thing. I picked them up on eBay, actually. These are probably the dice I have the most faith in. They do seem to roll pretty hot. You see on here, there's one roll of them where I got 4 6s together like that. We have the Dalamroth Dark dice. Now, these are the official Games Workshop ones. I first got them, had a lot of faith in them initially. They seemed to get a lot of 6s, but then I suddenly realised my results at tournaments were just not very good, and I was coming out of the tournaments feeling like I was just betrayed by my dice. Went back to my Dalamroth Light dice, and however much it might be in my head, I suddenly started doing better. Maybe I also figured out the army a bit better because I was running Defenders of Pelennor for the first time, and Perhaps I'm better at it now and I've built a more balanced list, maybe. And then for evil, we have the Azog dice from Baron of Dice. I have a lot of faith in these as my probably best evil dice. They do seem to go hot in streaks, but these seem to be generally pretty good from what I see with them, using them. You see some interesting results on here where I got 7 of my 8 dice over 4+ at the top one, and then I've got a horrendous 4 high on 8 dice, and yeah, some interesting mixed rolls there. We then have the Dolgul Dur dice. Now, I expected these to be the worst ones in the results. I have absolutely zero faith in these dice. They have brief hot streaks where I cannot stop getting 6s, but then predominantly for the other 80% of the time, they're awful. 1s, 2s, 3s, non-stop, awful. I have absolutely zero faith in them. If I ever need a game to end on a 1 or a 2, I'll even joke with my opponent saying, I believe this Dolgul Dur dice will roll a 1 or a 2. It flipping always does. It's totally all in my head, but I swear it happens. And then last of all, we have these funky ones. I only really use these because they're not the easiest to see when you roll them. So I always make sure I don't move them quick. I always make sure my opponent can see them. But I just like the colouring on them. I only ever use these for like my space support in a hero fight or something like that. If I ever need a 3rd coloured evil dice, I will roll these. But I always notice they randomly come up with 6s, so I thought I expected them to do pretty well. So yeah, let's get on to the results, because that's the important bit that you're probably interested to see in here. So these are the 1s and 2s, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 across the top, and each row is conditionally formatted, and in the bottom table, each column is conditionally formatted. So what you can see here is, other than my Dolgul Dur dice, which is what I expected, all my dice statistically rolled less 1s than I expected them to, which I find quite interesting. With 120 rolls, you should be getting 20 of each outcome. If you were following perfect statistical average, you're always going to get some variance, of course. But it is quite interesting that 5 of my 6 dice sets all rolled less 1s than statistical average would assume. I also find it very interesting that if you look at the 2s section, all of them were above statistical average, except the Azog face dice. You've also got some interesting anomalies there. So if you look at Dale, they seem to be extremely good at rolling 5s. The Dalamroth Dark dice on 3s, the Azog dice, just in general, them getting a 4+, 34 pluses. Well, 34s, 24 5s, and 18 6s. So even though the 6s were 2 lower than statistical average, you've got 14 rolls extra than you would expect on 4s and 5s, and their 1s, 2s, and 3s were all statistically under. So that immediately paints the picture that my Azog dice are possibly my best dice, or most consistent at getting a decent roll. However, as I also suspected at the start, the Dalamroth light coloured dice got the most 6s. Interesting. Not surprising to me that Dolgul Dur did not perform particularly well. They did get a surprising amount of 6s, but across the board, only statistical 5s. They just categorically can't roll 4s, and they were all above statistical average on 1s, 2s, and 3s. So that's not good. The one that really surprised me, though, was the funky dice. Very, very random there. They seem to be very, very good at rolling 2s and 5s, but just categorically don't roll many 6s. So if we look at the bottom table now, I calculated the average roll of each dice. Now, with only outcomes of 1 to a 6, the average roll you should be getting is 3.5. And if you look at that, it's interesting that 5 of the 6 sets of dice all performed slightly higher than statistical average, with again only Dolgul Dur coming out under, which clearly shows that my Dolgul Dur dice are the worst dice, as I expected. And interestingly, my madness has been justified. My Dalamroth light dice and the Azog face dice were both the highest average rolls. But then we move across to the rest of the table here, and I calculated the odds on getting a 4+. So this is a 50-50 chance getting a 4+ on a dice, or it should be. But Dale, the Delamroth Dark Dice official Games Workshop, and the official Games Workshop Dolguldur dice. So actually Dale as well, they were the official Games Workshop dice. So all three official Games Workshop dice statistically roll lower than a 4+, not higher than a 4+. Whereas the funky dice off eBay, the Azog Baron of Dice, and also the Delamroth Light Dice from another dice manufacturer, all performed better than statistical average. And then we go to the 5+ chance. They should be performing at about 33% here. And you can see all of them, but one actually did outperform that. Some of those because they performed better than you would expect with 6s, or better than would be expected with 5s. So actually Dolguldur didn't do too bad getting 5+. They were slightly above average. It was just the Delamroth Dark Dice that was surprisingly, because they were so bad at rolling 5s, even though they performed a little better on the 6s than you would expect, they still came out as the worst one here. Interesting that the Dale dice were the best for a 5+, but that is mostly because of how many 5s they rolled. But then we come to the big one, the 6s. So you should have a 16% chance. And Dolguldur slightly outperformed it, as did Delamroth Dark Dice, but the Delamroth light coloured dice were fantastic, as you can see here. They got the most amount of 6s. You saw on the previous slide, they had a few occasions where they got an absolute multitude of 6s in one go, which is not uncommon for me. When I've rolled them, it's what sometimes happens. If I ever have a big moment in the game and it's like, oh, I really need a load of wounds, it's like a big play, big moment, it's maybe a turning point in the game. If I was to pick up any set of dice that I'd just have a little bit more faith in to actually just have a moment where they roll a load of 6s, I'd pick those. And they've proved me right here. So interesting experiment. Maybe consider doing it yourself. Maybe I'm not the only crazy person out there that notices these things with the dice. So conclusion for me is, first of all, sack off your Dolguldur dice if you own any, unless you need to roll evil or to end the game on a 1 or a 2. If you ever need to get a 4+, get yourself Baron of Dice, Azog Face Dice, definitely. Delamroth Light Dice are the best, unless you need to roll a 1, in which case they're awful. I've not written on this one, but it's occurred to me as I've gone through the video here. The Games Workshop official dice are actually worse than all of the dice I tested against. But in reality, most of this is in our heads. There are potentially very small margins with some dice, as I've shown there, compared to others. So it's not entirely in my head. You do what the little nuances of the rolls that you notice. You just think, oh, that's coming up a bit. That low roll's coming up a bit more often than it should. And I don't feel I'm getting enough 4+ and things with these dice. There is something there. There is something tangible that your brain is latching onto that you're seeing. But most of it is in our heads. And really, we just need to enjoy the game, accept dice are dice, and pick your dice for the theme, the colour, or what links to your army. However, I'd be really interested to see if some of you out there also maybe try this experiment for yourself. Let me know how you get on. Were your perceptions going into it justified with the results at the end? Do you think there's anything I could have done to improve my experiment other than to do more rolls to really see if it reaches statistical average, or if there really is a proper underlying problem with Dolguldur dice, for instance? I'd also be interested to try it with some other sets, because I'm sure everyone has their own personal dice that they slightly favour, or ones that they don't really trust. But I'm interested to hear I believe there's certain dice out there that you always don't like to see your opponent using because you just know them as being good at getting sixes. For me, it's Rivendell dice, Minas Tirith dice, and the Fangorn dice. I see loads of people using those three, and I don't know. Maybe it's again my brain latching onto it. Maybe it's a thing of facing elves with Rivendell. If they roll sixes, it matters more, stops you from rolling. Maybe you feel it a bit more. But they're the dice that when I turn up to a table and I see my opponent pull them out, it's like, ah, crap, I'm in for a rough one here. What I always find really interesting is when you come up against somebody that's using an evil army and then they pull out Minas Tirith and Rivendell dice and things like that. It's like, okay, they obviously have more faith in those dice than any others. So there we go. Only quite a short video, this one. I'll be coming out with a much longer, normal sort of video in the next few days. But I'd be really interested to hear what you all think. And yeah, let me know if you do your own experiment and let me know how you get on. Now, hopefully you've liked that little look behind the curtain at my insanity. If you have enjoyed the little video, please like it, subscribe for more content that'll be coming out. I've got my Birdie's World tournament log on Spotify if you want to check that out. I talk about all the tournaments that I go to and tactics and how I've handled each game. And yeah, follow me on there. If you like what I do as well, there is Patreon. There'll be links to both the Spotify and Patreon. If you like what I'm doing, please consider supporting me. And thank you to all of those that already do. And yeah, hope you have a nice evening, everyone. Take care.